Hello everyone, welcome to my channel where I explain French using English. So today's French lesson will be about le passé composé, which is the past tense. Uh, as you know, it is very crucial to know this tense because it will enable you to talk about actions completed in the past. So make sure to stick around until the end because we're going to do an exercise together. So, let's get started. Donc, utilisation. When can we use, or when do we use le passé composé? Première utilisation, c'est action ponctuelle dans le passé. Action ponctuelle dans le passé. So, le participe, ou bien le passé composé, it is used to describe specific punctual actions that happened at a precise moment in the past. Okay? That's the first usage. Deuxième utilisation, c'est action achevée, completed actions. It indicates that the action is finished and has no direct link to the present. And lastly, succession d'actions au passé. Succession d'actions au passé. So, le passé composé is also used to employ or to describe a series of successive actions. Okay, one action after one action after one action. All of them are done in the past. We use le passé composé. Now that we know when do we use le passé composé, let's find out how can we form it. Donc, formation, l'auxiliaire être ou avoir au présent plus le participe passé. L'auxiliaire être ou avoir au présent plus le participe passé. So, what it says here is to form le passé composé, you need two main components. You need two main components, an auxiliary verb and the past participle. Okay, that's what you need. Auxiliary verb and past participle. So let's do a quick reminder about l'auxiliaire être and auxiliaire avoir in the present tense. If you don't know it, I suggest you go to my other video where I speak about the present tense, le présent de l'indicatif, where I covered this at length. So, avoir au présent, on dit j'ai, tu as, il, elle a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont. Et pour être, on dit je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont. Très bien. Now that we know l'auxiliaire être ou avoir au présent, what about le participe passé? So, le participe passé, or the past participle, depends on the verb ending. It really depends on the verb ending. So, verbe de premier groupe, par exemple, le verbe parler, le participe passé, c'est parler. So, all the verbs that belong to the first group, their past participle finishes with e accent, a. So, with that in mind, let's do another example. Par exemple, le verbe manger, le participe passé will be manger. Le verbe donner, le participe passé of the verb will be donner. Voyager, le participe passé of this verb will be voyager. And yes, they do have the same sound or the same pronunciation. Verbe de deuxième groupe. So all the verbs that belongs to the second group, their participle past finishes with I. OK? Par exemple, le verbe finir, on a fini. With that logic in mind, we can do other example. For example, le verbe choisir. So, le participe passé will be choisi. Le verbe grandir. Le participe passé will be grandi. Le verbe maigrir. Le participe passé will be maigri. And you continue with this logic. OK? Très bien. Maintenant, les verbes du troisième groupe. So, in this case, the verb, ou bien le participe passé, either finishes with U or ES or IT. Attendre gives us attendu, prendre, pris, écrire, écrit. What I can tell you here is there is a high chance that the verb will finishes with U. Okay? The verb will finish with U. There's a high chance. With that in mind, there are other verbs that can finish with ES or IT. And lastly, let's not forget about extremely irregular verbs such as le verbe être and avoir. Donc, le verbe être, le participe passé c'est été, le verbe avoir, euh, le participe passé is e. Je répète, être nous donne été et avoir c'est e. E. OK? Très bien. Now, probably the question that you have is when do we use avoir and when do we use être? So, la majorité des verbes utilisent avoir. La majorité des verbes utilisent avoir. Mais certains verbes utilisent être. Certains verbes utilisent être, comme les verbes de mouvement et verbes pronominaux. Verbes de mouvement et verbes pronominaux. Okay? So, basically what it says here is most verbs use avoir. Most verbs use avoir. However, some verbs, mainly those related to movement or change of state, and all reflexive verbs use être. Let me repeat that. Most verbs use avoir, but there are some verbs, those related to movement or change of state, and all the reflexive verbs, les verbes pronominaux, use être. So let's see an example. Verbe de mouvement, on a le verbe aller, arriver, partir, sortir, entrer, descendre, retourner, tomber, intervenir. Right? So these verbs indicates movements. What I can suggest to you here is you go to Google and you check la maison d'être. La maison d'être, the house of être. There are about 16 verbs, not that much, luckily, that are used with the auxiliary être. Okay? So go to Google and search la maison d'être, where you find all the verbs. And of course, les verbes de pronominaux, se laver, se réveiller, se brosser, se promener. Well, this is logical because they are reflexive verbs. Therefore, we use auxiliaire être. Très bien. Now, let's talk about something very, very important, which is the agreement of the participle past. Accord, bien accord du participe passé. Accord du participe passé. So, avec être, accord en genre et en nombre avec le sujet. Donc, with the auxiliary être, accord en genre et en nombre avec le sujet. In other words, with être, The past participle agrees in gender and number with the subject. Okay? For instance, il est allé au marché. So as you can see here, there is an extra E that stands for the feminine because the subject is feminine. So le participe passé should be feminine. And let's see the other example. Ils sont partis en vacances. Ils sont partis en vacances. So ils, they are plural. Therefore, le participe passé should have an S for plural. Okay? Now, that's with the auxiliary être. What about avoir? Avec avoir, pas d'accord, sauf si le COD avant le verbe. COD is an abbreviation for complément d'objet direct. Okay? A direct complement. So basically what it says here is with avoir, the past participle doesn't agree. Doesn't agree. Except in one case. And that case is when the direct object comes before the verb. Okay, let me repeat that. With avoir, the past participle doesn't agree at all, unless there is one case. And that case is when the complement or the direct complement is before the verb. For instance, j'ai mangé une pomme. So notice here, j'ai mangé une pomme. This is COD, complément d'objet direct. It is after the verb. So I'm not going to agree le participe passé with the subject, right? I'm gonna respect the rule of not agreeing. But when there is the COD before the verb, as you can see here, la pomme que j'ai mangée, the apple that I ate. Now, manger, le participe passé has an extra E that stands for the feminine because la pomme is a feminine word. Très bien. So this is the agreement of the past participle. Let's see an example of conjugation. Donc, on a le verbe visiter au passé composé. Normal verb. So I'm going to use, of course, auxiliary avoir with the participle past of the verb visiter. Donc, we have j'ai visité, tu as visité, il et a visité, nous avons visité, vous avez visité, ils ont visité. Okay? Let's see an example. Hier, nous avons visité Paris. Hier, nous avons visité Paris. Let's see another conjugation or another example. Arriver au passé composé. So in here, I have to be a little bit cautious. Why? The verb arriver belongs to the category of the movement verb. There is a movement in it, right? So basically, I'm going to use the auxiliary être. So, je suis arrivé, tu es arrivé, il est arrivé, nous sommes arrivés, vous êtes arrivés, ils sont arrivés. So, pronunciation doesn't change, as you can see, but let's notice le participe passé, how it is agreeing with the subject. Okay? That's because the verb is conjugated with the auxiliary être. And of course, when there's auxiliary être, we have to agree the participle past with the subject, as we saw. So let's see an example. Ils sont arrivés hier. They arrived yesterday. Ils sont arrivés hier. So this is everything you need to know about le passé composé. Okay. Now it's time to practice. Let's do an exercise together. Conjuguer les verbes au passé composé. Conjugate the following verbs in the past tense. Okay. So let's see la première phrase. Nous au restaurant hier soir. So the verb here is the verb manger. Normal verb, so I'm going to use auxiliary avoir and participle past will be manger with a accent because it belongs to the first group, right? As we saw. So la réponse est nous avons mangé au restaurant hier soir. Nous avons mangé au restaurant hier soir. Let's see the second sentence. Il au cinéma samedi dernier. The verb aller. Now, wait a minute. Here is the verb aller. You need to go. This verb is a verb of movement, right? So if it is a verb of movement, I need to conjugate it with the auxiliary être, right? So that will become ils sont allés. But there is a small mistake there because as we said, the auxiliary, when there is a verb conjugated with être, the participle past agrees with the subject. So the subject is il, which is they, which is plural. So I have to add an extra S here. Ils sont allés au cinéma samedi dernier. Okay, next one. Je mes devoirs avant de sortir. The verb is faire, belongs to the third group. So probably it's going to finish with ite. That's one of those verbs that finishes with ite. Donc, the answer will be j'ai fait. J'ai fait mes devoirs avant de sortir. Okay, next sentence. Il très tôt ce matin. Le verbe, c'est se lever. Okay, the verb se lever is within the category of the verb pronominal, a reflexive verb. So we said that reflexive verbs are conjugated with être. Therefore, we'll have il s'est levé. Il s'est levé. Il s'est levé très tôt ce matin. Okay, next one. Elle en vacances. Le verbe partir. So partir, we need to leave, is a movement verb. So this verb needs to be conjugated also with the auxiliary être. Donc, elle est partie. And once again, since it's conjugated with être, I have to make sure making sure that the participle past is agreeing with the subject. And the subject is elle, which means she. That implies she's feminine, right? So I have to add an extra E for the feminine version. Elle est partie en vacances. Elle est partie en vacances. Et dernièrement, tu la télévision, le verbe regarder. Donc regarder, normal verb. So I am going to use avoir here because as we said, the majority of verbs are conjugated with the auxiliary avoir unless it's within the movement verbs or reflexive verbs. So regard is just a normal verb, so I'm going to use avoir here. Tu as regardé la télévision. Okay, so to wrap up our lesson on le passé composé, le passé composé est essentiel pour raconter des événements passés, maîtriser l'auxiliaire approprié et les accords du participe passé, pratique régulière pour se familiariser avec ce temps. So, just remember, mastering this tense involve involves choosing the right auxiliary verb and making the correct agreement with the past participle. Keep practicing to get more comfortable with it. Okay? And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. So thank you for watching. I'll see you soon. Au revoir.